Hello and welcome to Relatable Code. In this video, we're going to talk about a very crucial topic in programming, and that's value types versus reference types. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so let's delete these two lines of code, and let's say I have a var number of books 1 equals to, for example, 41, and I create another variable, number of books 2 equals to number of books 1. Okay. Let's say I incremented number of books 1 by just one book, basically. And now I want to print out number of books 1 and number of books 2. What do you expect should happen in this case? Number of books 1 should be now equal to 42, and number of books 2 should still be equal to 41. Okay, let's run our function. And that's it. We have 42 for number of books 1 and 41 for number of books 2. Okay, that's basically because we assigned number of books 2 to number of books 1, which was an integer. Okay, an integer is a primitive type in Kotlin, as we've previously discussed, similar to the Boolean, to the float, to the double, and the different primitive types in Kotlin. Okay. Well, what if we tried to do something like that for our science book, for example? We create science book 1 equals to science book, and it will expect a title, an author, and a price. And we create a science book 2 equals to science book 1. Let's say that now we change the title of science book 1 like this to title. And we can't do that because it's a val, apparently. Let's change that to var so that we can just compile it. And that's it. So we created a science book 1 equal to this value. We created a science book 2 and we assigned it to science book 1, and we changed the title of science book 1. Okay, let's say now we want to print out, let's print out the whole science book 1 and science book 2. What do you expect? Well, you should expect that Science Book 1 should have a new title, author, and 6.0, as usual. And with respect to Science Book 2, it should be title, author, and 6.0. Because when we assigned Science Book 1 to Science Book 2, that was the state of Science Book 1, right? Let's run our function. And here you can see something. Science Book 1 had new title, and Science Book 2 also had new title. Well, how come? That's because when we assign Science Book 2, we assigned it to a data class. Okay? When you do that to data classes or even lists in Kotlin, it's as if you're doing some reference assigning. Okay? So I'm not assigning Science Book 2 to the value of Science Book 1. I'm assigning it to the reference of Science Book 1 in my memory. Okay? And the difference is basically what you've seen. What we did with number of books was basically value assigning. So we created number of books 1, it was an integer. We assigned number of books 2 with this value, number of books 1, which was 41 at this time. We incremented number of books 1, so now it was 42. But when we printed out number of books 1 and 2, we had 42 and 41. Okay? Number of books 2 didn't change with number of books 1. because it was assigned to the value of number of books 1, because number of books 1 was an integer. So if you have an integer or a float or a boolean or any other primitive type of data in Kotlin, when you assign a value to that primitive type, you assign it to the value of that primitive type. So when you change the first variable, the second variable doesn't change. But that doesn't apply to data classes and lists in general in Kotlin. Okay, basically collections. As you've seen, we created a science book 1 like this with a title, an author, and a price. We assigned science book 2 the same way that we did with number of books 2, and we only changed the title of science book 1. But what happened was this title was changed for both science book 1 and science book 2 because, as we've discussed, science book 2 was assigned to the reference of science book 1 in our memory. So when we change a value with that reference, the other value will change as well. Okay? Because now science book 1 and science book 2 are trying to use the same reference in memory. Okay? That's why when you change anything related to science book 1, maybe the price, which is also a val, and rerun your project, you're going to have that price reflected for science book 2 as well. Okay? This applies to lists as well, and you're going to see how. Let's say we have var books equals to array list of, let's say we just have some, or let's say we have some strings. Book 1, book 2, and book 3. We create another books list, we call it books 2, and it's equal to books, and we add a new book for our books array list, and now we want to print out both books and books 2. Let's comment out our previous code and rerun the application. As you can see, when we added a new book to books 1, it was also added to books 2. Okay? When we assigned books to books 2 as a value, now books 2 holds the same reference in memory as our books. So when we change the value for that reference, whether it's books or books 2, the other value will also change and reflect that. Okay? Let's say we added this to books 2 and we rerun our function. As you can see, that also works because, as we've discussed, they are both using the same reference in our memory. So when we change the value of any of these lists or any of these classes, the value of the other variable will change as well. Okay? Both of them now have a new book which is called book 5. Okay? Remember when we used the .copy method of our data classes here? Well, .copy provides an exception for our case because when you use .copy, you're no longer creating a new variable with this reference. Instead, you're copying the value of your science book 2. Okay, let's comment out our previous code here. And let's just print out science book 2 and 3. What we did here in the previous video, we created a science book 2 like this, and we used science book 3.copy, and we only changed the title for Science Book 3. Okay, now we attempt to print them both. Let's run our function again. And here you can see we have class title for Science Book 2 and class title 2 for Science Book 3. Okay, this is a very handy method for data classes, the dot copy, and you're going to use it. Okay, so be careful when you're using value types or reference type in your code so that you can make sure what behavior you have. Okay, and as we've discussed with respect to value types, you can also have them for strings, for booleans, for floats, for doubles. Let's say we're working with a string here. So we have name1 equals to var, var name2 equals to var2. Okay, and here, or it's equal to name1. Name1 will now be equal to var2, and we're going to print out name1 and name2. So what do you expect? Let's run our function. And here we have var2 and var. Okay, because we're dealing with strings, which is a primitive type. So when we assign a new value to name2, which is another variable of type string, we're assigning the value of that variable and not the reference. Okay? This is a topic that's often overlooked by a lot of software engineers, but you really have to know how these work under the hood, because you might face a lot of issues with value types and reference types in the future. So now you can start to have an idea if you're using value types or reference types and what each of them will mean for your code. Okay? If you like this type of content, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for future content, and I'll see you in the next video.